Hey everyone, we are on 29. We have discussed the basics of the field of anatomy, different ways to study anatomy. Here, we're discussing the special language and words that we use when we're working and talking about anatomy. To help you remember vocabulary, I personally think a good strategy is to focus on what makes up these words. The words we use in anatomy can be pretty complicated, so it takes time to get used to them. But to get used to them, I think the best way to do this is to break down the words, to understand what they mean. The fancy word for understanding the meaning of words is etymology. Ology, we've seen this before, that means the study of. Etymo, that's referring to words. We're studying words, etymology. By studying the origins and meanings of words, I think we can better understand what those words are, and it will help us remember what they are too. So for instance, the word anatomy, here it is in Greek. Don't worry, I can't read all of that, at least not each individual letter. I guess this is alpha, there's mu, whatever. Anatomy, spelled kind of like that. What does anatomy mean? The ana part means apart. The to me part means to cut. So literally anatomy means to cut apart. And that makes sense. While anatomy does not always involve cutting things apart, that is a fundamental part of anatomy, to look inside of something to understand what makes up that human body or other body. You can study the anatomy of other things, not just humans, but of course we're studying human anatomy. So I encourage you to look at different words, everyday words, from your own name to words like psychology, or what's another good word that I've thought of recently? Well, I can't think of one, but every word has an etymology. Just search the word and etymology, and you can on the internet, and you can find some interesting origins of where things come from. So the word anatomy comes from Greek. Like my name, Azim, is an Arabic word. It means great one or defender. Every word has a meaning and an origin. The anatomy that we study uses a very particular language in order to avoid confusion. If I just say look up, up is relative. Up could mean above my head, or if I'm lying down, up could mean towards my stomach. Those are two different things. So which way is up? We don't want any relativity. We want certainty. So we need to know some very specific words that we're going to learn here, how to describe different directions and locations. Once again, the anatomy words that we use are mostly Greek and Latin based. That's just how our foundation has come to be. So you'll notice that most of them are Greek or Latin. We need a frame of reference because, like I said, if we're referring to a direction, is it for standing up, facing one way or another, sitting down, lying down? It can get confusing. So we need a frame of reference. The term for our frame of reference is called anatomical position. Anatomical position. Anatomical position is where your face is facing forward anteriorly. Your palms are facing forward anteriorly. Your toes are facing forward anteriorly, and you're standing up straight. That is anatomical position. So when we refer to directions, it's based on this position that you see here, that I've just circled. Now, of course, we're not always standing in this basic position. Sometimes we're lying down. The term for lying down is supine, like having your face up. The term for that is supine. The opposite of that, to have your face down, say you're laying face down on your bed, you're lying in a prone position. Supine is face up, prone is face down. One way you can remember that, at least this makes sense when you're referring to your palm. In the supine position, your palm is facing up. It's like you're going to hold a bowl of soup, supine. Prone is the other way, facing down. In anatomical position, the front part of you, this part that you see in this picture, and that I just colored in pink, that is your anterior side, anterior. Another term applicable for humans for the same view is ventral. The word ventral is referring to the stomach. If anyone knows Latin or French stomach is ventre. Anyways, the stomach side is on the front side for humans, so the ventral side is also anterior. They're synonymous for humans. We're going to talk about four-legged animals coming up in a second. On the posterior side, the back side, that's the term for backside, posterior. Another word for that is dorsal. Dorsal means back. So, well, it really means the whole thing, but dorsal means back. So anterior is the front side, posterior is the back side. For humans, ventral and anterior are synonymous. Dorsal and posterior are synonymous. When we're referring to the head and torso, we'll get to arms and legs in a minute. When referring to the head and torso, towards the head is superior, that's up. Towards the head is superior. Towards your tail, towards your hips, that's inferior. Up, superior, down, inferior. If we're referring, so those are vertical directions. If you want horizontal directions, we have medial. Well, let me back up here. If we have an imaginary line down the middle, the symmetrical line down our middle, towards that line is medial. Towards that line is medial. Away from the line is lateral. Medial toward the middle, lateral towards the side. On either side. Lateral could also be that way too. That way as well. Sometimes we need an even more specific term. This is our midline, but then there's something here in pink, there's something here in blue, and then there's something here in yellow in the middle. What's a term for something not towards a midline, but in between the most lateral and the most medial things? The term for that is intermediate. You can see a picture here of the same thigh that I've drawn. There are three muscles, there's more than three, but there are three muscles here in your left thigh, your left femoral region. The one in between is the intermediate muscle. It's called the vastus intermedius, but it's intermediate to the medialis and vastus lateralis. So when you use the word intermediate, that word is to describe something in between two other things. You're going to compare it to two other things. Let me actually back up and show you some ways to use this language. Back to slide 32. If I compare, these words are comparison words. So I can say that anterior, like what is something that's anterior? My stomach, the stomach is anterior to your back. That's one way you can say it. The stomach is anterior to your back. Another thing you could say, if you flip it, if you say the back first, your back is posterior to your stomach. So it depends how you say it. Your stomach is anterior to your back is posterior to your stomach. Another example, your head is superior to your breast. Your head is superior, it's above your breast. Or flip that, your breast is inferior to your head. Your breast is inferior to your head. Your shoulder, I don't want to use shoulder, let me use a different word. Your eye is lateral to your nose. Your eye is lateral to your nose. Your nose is medial to your eye. And then I gave you an example here for intermediate, your vastus intermedius, this muscle here in the middle. Your vastus intermedius is intermediate to the vastus medialis and vastus lateralis. You're comparing to two other things. Because our arms and legs are appendages, because our arms and legs can move around, that can get confusing because right now my hands are superior, right now my hands are lateral, now my hands are inferior. We don't want to use those terms, lateral, inferior, superior, to describe things on our arms and legs, on our appendages, because these are very movable structures. So we have special words that are used just for our appendages. If something is closer to the point of attachment, meaning your shoulder or your hip, if something is closer to your shoulder or hip, it is proximal. For example, my shoulder is proximal to my thumb. My shoulder is proximal to my thumb. If you want to say something that's farther along the appendage, you could say it the opposite. My thumb is distal. My thumb is distal to my shoulder. That's for the arm. For the leg, you could say that the knee, let me use a different color. You could say that the knee is proximal to the ankle. The knee is proximal to the ankle. It's closer to the main joint or the hip. Or you could say the ankle is distal to the knee. That's also accurate. We are three-dimensional things. All these words that we've been using have mostly been in 2 dimensions along this vertical, horizontal, well, I guess several dimensions, but we need a 3rd dimension here. We can capture that idea by measuring the distance from the surface of the body. And so there are 2 terms to describe distance from the surface. If something is closer to the surface, it's superficial. If something is closer to the surface of the body, it's superficial. Take a look at this picture down here, the bottom left. This is an illustration of skin. You can see the surface of skin right here. You can see deeper skin down here. So I know you haven't really learned these terms yet, but this is the epidermis, and then down here, I kind of covered it up, is the subcutaneous. You can say that the epidermis is superficial to the subcutaneous. The epidermis is superficial to the subcutaneous. It's closer to the surface. This picture here on the right side is showing a dissection, an illustration of dissection of muscles. So the skin has been removed, and we're looking at muscles on the back. On this side, our left side, and also the left side of this illustration, this is a superficial dissection. So you can see muscles that are overlaying. Muscles are often layered, and you can see that on the back, there are muscles that are layered. On the left side, we're looking at the muscles that are more superficial, and then on the right side, we've removed the more superficial muscles. The term for something that's farther in from the surface is deep. So to use this word, we could say that if we go back to this example of the skin, the epidermis is superficial to the subcutaneous. We could say that the subcutaneous is deep to the epidermis. The subcutaneous is deep to the epidermis. We can say that the trapezius is superficial to the rhomboid minor. We can say that the trapezius is superficial to the rhomboid minor. We can say that the rhomboid minor is deep to the trapezius. Those are ways to use these directional terms in terms of depth, superficial and deep. This next set of terms is very unique, but before I explain that, let me point something out real quick. Let's just look at this person right here. We're looking at this person. You can see that they're in anatomical position. We're looking at them. So when we're looking at someone at their anterior side, remember that over here, where I just circled, this is their right side. And over here, this is their left side. When you're looking at someone head on in anatomical position, right side is over here, left side is over here. That can get confusing, but it's always relative to that person. So, using these right and left terms, this applies a lot when we talk about the nervous system. For example, if I want to, let's say I want to control winking on my right eye, control the muscle around here to cause my eye to wink. To do that, it takes a signal from my brain on the right side to control something on my right side. In that case, the control is on the same side from right to right. The term for that is ipsilateral. Ipsilateral refers to same side. Sometimes, whether it's sensation or control, like let's say I want to touch something with my right hand. If I touch something with my right hand, that information will actually get processed in my left brain. So there's this crossing sides from right to left and left to right for both sensory and control in certain cases. We'll go over the specific details later, but the term for this, where you have a crossing over of information, that's called contralateral. Contra means against. Contralateral. Ipsilateral is same side, contralateral is opposite side. We'll be using these terms more so when we get to the nervous system. I said that when we're looking at humans, so let's take a look at this human over here. When we're looking at humans, the anterior side is also ventral, and the posterior side is also dorsal. Ventral is anterior, posterior is dorsal. That's true because we stand on 2 feet. If you're a 4-legged organism, like this alligator, crocodile, one of those, if you have a 4-legged animal here, their ventral side, which I just colored in pink, their ventral side, it's not anterior, because anterior is this way. It's towards their head. Their ventral side is inferior. And their dorsal side is superior. So it depends if we're talking about a 4-foot or 2-foot organism. We'll be doing fetal pig dissections, so that's where we'll be using this distinction when I'm informing you now about it. Back to, let me clear this for a second. Back to looking at the 4-legged organism here. Since their head is pointing anterior and their tail is pointing posterior, there's no real bend in their nervous system. They have a brain right here. They do. It's not that big, but it's there. And they have a spinal cord that extends this way. The brain and spinal cord just kind of go in a straight line. There's no bend in what we call the neuraxis. There's no bend in the neuraxis, in the brain and spinal cord line. But for us, take a look at the picture down here. I'm going to color in green. Here's our brain. And the spinal cord comes at a bend. Well, the brain bends and then the spinal cord goes down. There's a bend in the neuraxis in humans because we stand on 2 feet. So here are 2 specific terms to describe where we are in the nervous system. If we're towards the front of our brain, the term for that is rostral. Rostral. If we're towards the end of the spinal cord, it's caudal. The word cauda means tail. That term will come up a lot in this class. Cauda means tail. Rostral is towards the front of the brain. Caudal is towards the tail of the spinal cord. So these terms I will use exclusively for the nervous system. Rostral and caudal. Right, I think, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, we'll, next video, we'll be going over terms to describe regions. So that will be in the next video. Hopefully this made sense. If it didn't, rewind, watch it again, and comment in the discussion.